Unaware his wife secretly owned the company his mother and mistress worked for, husband slapped her across the face in front of them. What she did next left them all in tears. He didn't just lose his temper. He slapped his wife across the face in the middle of a busy office hallway, with his mother on one side, his secret mistress on the other, and a line of stunned employees watching every second. That afternoon, Emma Turner stood under the cold office lights, her cheek burning red, her heart trying to understand how the man she once trusted had become a stranger. Mark Turner, her husband, glared at her like she was beneath him. Behind him, his mother Linda smirked with cruel approval, and his co-worker, Sarah, hid a small, satisfied smile on her painted lips. "You don't speak to me like that." "Not here," Mark hissed, in the very building he thought gave him power. What he didn't know was this: the company logo on the glass doors, the paychecks in his pocket, the job his mother bragged about, even the office access his mistress flaunted, all of it quietly traced back to one name: Emma's. Long before the slap, while they laughed at her behind her back and called her nothing, Emma had been working late nights in a small home office, signing documents he never bothered to read, answering calls he never asked about, and building something under a name he never thought to question. He believed she was just another employee's wife. He believed he was safe humiliating her in front of the people who thought they outranked her. He believed she would walk away in shame. He had no idea she was about to walk back in with the truth. Dear viewers, thank you for being here. If you watch without subscribing, it's like letting Emma's story be buried under their lies. When you click that button, you stand with every quiet soul who was underestimated. Please subscribe now and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. The glow of the computer screen lit up Emma Turner's face like a quiet spotlight, but the tension in her eyes said everything. This was no ordinary late-night work session. Her fingers moved quickly across thick folders labeled Keller Holdings, subsidiary approvals, flipping page after page with a careful, practiced rhythm. Anyone else would slow down, get tired, lose focus. But Emma, 29 years old, carried a mind sharpened by responsibility and a heart trained to endure pressure. Only one lamp illuminated her home office. No luxury on display, no obvious signs of the wealth she controlled, just a clean desk, a modest bookshelf, and a single-frame picture beside her keyboard. In that picture stood a tall man with soft eyes and a hand resting proudly on a younger Emma's shoulder. Her father, Richard Keller, founder of Keller Holdings, the parent corporation now under her control. He had passed away 5 years earlier, leaving her everything he built: majority shares, final voting rights, and a sealed letter that named her not just as his heir, but as his chosen successor. Instead of stepping into the spotlight as the heiress of a multi-billion-dollar empire, she chose something else. She chose the shadows. On paper, in the subsidiary where her husband Mark worked, Emma was just a strategic consultant whose name barely appeared outside internal emails and legal documents. Only the board and a handful of senior executives knew that the quiet consultant behind the scenes was actually the majority owner of Keller Holdings and, through it, of more than a dozen subsidiaries, including Mark's company. She never wanted Mark to marry her because of family money. She wanted love. She wanted truth. She wanted someone who would choose her without knowing the size of her inheritance. That was why she lived in a modest house instead of the penthouse she could easily afford. That was why she used her consulting fees, not her inheritance, to pay the mortgage. That was why she never told anyone that the distant investors everyone talked about weren't distant at all. They were her. Her father had prepared her for that decision long before he passed. A memory cut through the silence like a beam of light. Emma, at 15, sitting beside him in this very room, watching him close a deal over speakerphone. The call ended, and he leaned back, studying her with a thoughtful smile. "If you ever lead people," he said softly, "lead from the shadows first. See how they act when they think you're no one." Back then, she didn't understand. But after Richard Keller's sudden heart attack, those words became her guide. Staying anonymous wasn't fear. It was protection. It was clarity. It was freedom. And yet, as she sat tonight reviewing automated HR notifications forwarded to her confidential email, part of the oversight rights that came with her voting power, She felt a sudden shift in her chest, like the air had tightened. Her email pinged. She clicked it without looking away from the documents. New hires approved. Subsidiary, Brightline Solutions position. Office assistant, Linda Carson position. Administrative assistant, pending, Sarah Blake, interview scheduled. Emma froze. The sound of her heartbeat filled the room. Linda Carson, her husband Mark's mother, 61 years old, sharp tongue, sharper judgments. A woman who had once looked Emma directly in the eye and said, "My son could have done better." A slow, cold exhale left Emma's body as another memory rose. Standing in Mark's childhood home, nervous but hopeful, Emma had offered Linda a small gift. Flowers her father used to grow. Linda never even touched them. She just glanced at the simple bouquet and said, "A girl with no real accomplishments should not aim so high." That moment had stung, but Emma had smiled politely. She had always believed people reveal themselves without force. Now Linda Carson, who for years acted as though Emma was beneath her, was stepping into a company controlled, silently and completely, by the daughter she underestimated. Why now? Was Linda looking for money? A new start after retirement? Or had Mark suggested it? Emma leaned back slowly, eyes narrowing, letting the logic settle. Keller Holdings was structured to hide the parent company's owner behind layers of legal entities. To the public, each subsidiary looked independent. Even most managers were told that Brightline Solutions belonged to a foreign investment group. Mark repeated that phrase often when he bragged about his employer. He had no idea that the foreign investment group was a trust created by his wife's father. What had once been a shield now created a strange twist of fate. Linda, the woman who doubted Emma's worth, was about to clock in under Emma's ownership, without knowing it. Emma whispered to herself, "Does Mark even know?" She doubted it. Mark never paid attention to corporate structure, only office gossip and performance bonuses. When she tried to talk about her consulting work, he waved it off as side paperwork. Still, something about this timing felt wrong, very wrong. She clicked back to the HR dashboard and pulled up the internal approval trail. Linda's application had moved unusually fast, flagged, fast-tracked, and signed off by a mid-level manager who rarely acted that quickly. Almost as if someone inside had pushed, someone who had no idea who Emma really was. Her jaw tightened. As she scrolled, another notification popped up at the top of her screen. Interview confirmed. Administrative assistant candidate, Sarah Blake interviewer, Mark Turner department, executive support. A name she had never heard before. But Mark had mentioned a new friend from work last week, a woman who was ambitious and a fast learner. A faint unease crawled up Emma's spine. She whispered, barely audible, "Why does this feel connected?" Her cursor hovered over Sarah's digital file. Little did she know. The sound hit her first, Mark slamming the front door before the sun had even risen. It wasn't the usual heavy close of someone in a hurry. It was sharp, impatient, edged with frustration. Emma Turner flinched at the noise, her body reacting before her mind caught up. She stepped into the hallway just in time to see her husband of 5 years, Mark Turner, 32, rushing out in a suit far too polished for an ordinary weekday. His tie was perfectly knotted, his hair immaculately styled, his cologne, stronger than usual, hung in the air long after he disappeared. Intensity filled the silence he left behind. Emma stood frozen. For the past month, Mark had been leaving home earlier and earlier, always with a new excuse. Urgent client calls, training sessions, last-minute meetings that strangely never showed up in the company-wide calendar she occasionally saw through her consulting access. But the tension on his face this morning, that wasn't simple work stress. That was something else. The moment his car engine started and faded down the street, she felt her chest tighten the way it did when something deep inside warned her the ground beneath her life was shifting. Slowly, she walked back into the living room, pressing a hand against her still-burning cheek from the emotional slap of his behavior, if not yet the physical one. Her mind drifted, and the memory of a younger Mark came to her like a soft dream, a flashback of their early marriage. Mark carrying her across the threshold of their small apartment, laughing, telling her, "I'll take care of you. You'll never feel alone with me." Another flash. Mark cooking a terrible dinner, but smiling proudly when she praised his effort anyway. Another. Him hugging her from behind in their tiny kitchen, whispering, "You're the best thing that ever happened to me." Those memories were warm, sweet. The reason she stayed patient when things felt off. The reason she tried to understand instead of accuse. But today, there was no warmth behind the door slam. Only distance. Only pressure. Emma sat on the edge of the couch, replaying the night before. Mark had come home late again, shirt slightly wrinkled but smelling faintly of perfume that wasn't hers. When she asked how work was, he answered too fast. Busy. Just tired. He hadn't looked her in the eye. Her rational mind had tried to step in. Maybe a client dinner, maybe a crowded elevator, maybe a colleague leaning in too close. She didn't want to be the wife who built stories from fear. But today, the string of excuses felt less like coincidence and more like a pattern. Mark's changes weren't random. He had recently been given a chance to impress upper management by coordinating with a new administrative assistant who could support him and other executives. That assistant was Sarah Blake. Leaving early gave him time to meet her for coffee before work and arrive together without drawing suspicion. Earlier hours also meant fewer chances for Emma to notice calls, messages, or unexpected detours. He wasn't just busy, he was rearranging his life. Later that morning, Emma remembered she needed the charger Mark kept in his car. He had rushed out so fast he forgot to take his briefcase. It still sat by the door, another sign his mind was somewhere else. She grabbed her keys and stepped outside, still trying to convince herself she was overthinking. When she opened the driver's door, something caught her eye. A napkin, white, folded neatly on the passenger seat. Her stomach tightened. She picked it up. That's when she saw it. A soft red lipstick stain. Not just any red, a deep rose. A shade she had seen 2 days ago on the lips of Sarah Blake, the new administrative assistant Mark had mentioned with unusual enthusiasm. She's really helpful, the kind of person who makes you look good without you asking. Emma had noticed the way he smiled when he talked about her. She had noticed the way he described Sarah's ambition, but pushed the discomfort aside. She didn't want jealousy to speak louder than reason. But this lipstick stain, this was not jealousy. This was evidence. Her hand trembled as she held the napkin. She could almost hear her father's voice again. Watch how people treat you when they think you don't see them. That's when their truth shows. Her heart pounded. She folded the napkin carefully and slipped it into her purse, not as a trophy of pain, but as a fact she could no longer deny. As she did, she noticed something else on the seat. A small plastic badge, a visitor's badge. She picked it up and read the print. Visitor, Keller Holdings, Headquarters, name Sarah Blake. Access, private office level, escorted. Date, yesterday. Her blood turned cold. Sarah didn't work for Keller Holdings directly. On paper, she was just a new assistant at Brightline Solutions, the subsidiary. Most employees never stepped foot in the parent company's building. Why would Sarah have private-level access to Keller Holdings? Why yesterday? Why without Emma being notified, despite her ownership? Emma straightened slowly. Whatever this was, she realized, Sarah wasn't just a co-worker. She was getting closer, to the very center of Emma's world. The elevator doors snapped open with a metallic clang, and Sarah Blake stepped out like she owned the entire floor. Her heels clicked sharply against the tiles, fast, confident, unapologetic. The same deep rose lipstick Emma Turner had seen on the napkin in Mark's car stained Sarah's smile. She walked with a sway that drew attention, a folder hugged against her chest. Intensity settled over the office the moment she entered. Employees whispered quietly. Some admired her confidence. Others raised brows, sensing trouble. But no one said anything aloud. Sarah was 26, newly hired as an administrative assistant, which technically placed her far below managers and even below external consultants like Emma. But Sarah acted as though she was being auditioned for something bigger. Her eyes scanned the open office floor, searching for someone, searching for Mark. When she spotted him across the room, tall, 32, in a tailored suit he never used to wear so often, her whole expression brightened. She walked faster, too fast, too familiar. Emma noticed everything from the far end of the hallway. Today wasn't a social visit. It was her scheduled site review day. Once a month, under the cover of her consultant role, Emma visited Brightline to quietly check culture, performance, and any red flags. Mark believed she simply liked to see where he worked. Management knew better. They saw her as the quiet representative of the investors. Now, hidden behind that role, she watched as Sarah approached Mark, brushing her hair behind her ear, drawing attention to her lips and neck. Sarah leaned in, too close for a normal work conversation, and whispered something that made Mark's shoulders shake with quiet laughter. Mark didn't see Emma standing 10 feet away. Not yet. Emma's heart tightened, but she forced herself not to look away. She needed clarity, not just emotion. She needed to understand why Sarah had visitor access to Keller Holdings and why her presence here felt like a performance. A nearby door opened. Linda Carson, Mark's mother, stepped out with a stack of files in her hands. 61, stern, sharp-eyed, she walked with the pride of someone who believed she understood power, even though her new job was simple: handle office supplies, help in the break room, and assist with basic admin tasks. Linda didn't care about the simplicity of the role. She cared about being in the building, about being close to her son, about watching Emma. Linda saw Emma in the hallway and froze for a split second. Then her expression hardened. She raised her chin a fraction, as if acknowledging someone beneath her. "Emma," she said with a stiff nod. No warmth, no respect. Emma returned a gentle smile. "Good morning, Linda. Settling in okay?" Linda ignored the question and kept walking, as though Emma had interrupted something more important. Linda's attitude wasn't born from nowhere. For years, she had only heard Mark's version of their marriage. He told her Emma was unambitious, financially dependent, and content to do light consulting for pocket money. He never mentioned her late nights, her quiet work, or her inheritance. He needed Linda to believe he was the strong, successful one. So he painted Emma as someone who needed him to survive. That lie shaped every look Linda gave her daughter-in-law. From the corner of her eye, Emma saw Sarah grab 2 coffees from the machine and walk toward Linda with almost theatrical sweetness. "Ms. Carson," Sarah said lightly, handing her a cup. "Mark told me you'd love this. Extra sweet, right?" Linda's face softened immediately. She loved being associated with anything that made Mark look important. "Thank you, dear," she replied, almost warm. Sarah leaned in closer, too close for a casual chat, and whispered something. Linda chuckled. Low, disrespectful. Emma stepped a little closer, staying half hidden behind a divider. From here, she could hear them clearly without being seen. Sarah's voice slipped through the space like poison. "He told me she'd never leave him," Sarah murmured, "because she has nothing." Linda's laughter sharpened. "That girl is lucky my son even married her." Emma felt those words like thin blades across her chest, but she stayed silent. She didn't flinch. She watched. Why did they think she had nothing? Why would Mark, who knew her childhood, her father, her grief, create that story? Sarah continued, her tone silky. "He says she's too plain, not ambitious. He needs someone who can keep up with him." Linda nodded approvingly. "Someone like you." There it was. Not just betrayal, a planned replacement. Emma stepped back before they could see her. Her eyes were calm, her breath steady, her heart bruised but not broken. She reached into her purse and touched the visitor badge she had found in Mark's car. How did Sarah get private access to Keller Holdings? Why was an assistant, hired barely weeks ago, already networking at the parent company level, without Emma's knowledge, yet still inside her empire? Something deeper was happening, something planned, something using her own company against her. Emma slipped the badge back into her purse and walked away from the hallway. "If this is how they act when they think I'm no one," she whispered to herself, "I need to see what they do when they think I'm not watching." The office was supposed to be empty. That was why the sudden burst of laughter hit Emma Turner like a slap long before the real one ever would. It wasn't just any laughter. It was Mark's, deep, familiar, intimate, and it was followed by a softer sound she recognized instantly. Sarah Blake. Emma's hands froze over the stack of internal reports she'd been reviewing. She had stayed late intentionally, using her consultant clearance to access the building after hours. She wanted to review the digital logs showing who had been given visitor access to Keller Holdings, especially Sarah. She thought she was alone, thought she had hours of quiet, but that laughter cut through the silence like a warning she didn't want to hear. Her pulse raced, her breath shortened, her stomach twisted. Intensity flooded her body. She stood slowly, careful not to make a sound, and walked toward the hallway. At night, the building felt different. Long shadows, dim emergency lights, the low hum of air conditioning. Every small noise echoed. The laughter grew louder. She followed it to a glass door leading to one of the confidential meeting rooms, a space normally used for high-level discussions and, according to the small plaque on the wall, monitored for security reasons. For quality and security, this room is under audio and video surveillance, a fact most employees ignored. The door wasn't fully closed. Through the narrow gap, she saw movement. Mark, Sarah. Her heart dropped before her mind could form words. Mark Turner, her husband of 5 years, the man who once whispered that he hated liars, had his hand on Sarah's waist. Sarah leaned into him, smiling up at him like he belonged to her, not to the woman standing hidden in the hallway. The sight hit Emma with such force she had to grip the wall to steady herself. She didn't push the door open. She didn't storm inside. She didn't announce herself. She watched, silent and shaking. Her mind yanked her backward into memory. A younger Mark on their wedding night, holding her hands and saying, "I hate cheaters, Emma. I'll never be like my father. I swear it." She had believed him. Completely. Now those words felt like poison. Sarah's voice drifted through the gap, cold and impatient. "When are you going to divorce her? She's a nobody. You said you'd handle it." Emma's knees weakened. She pressed a hand over her mouth to keep the sound inside. Panic surged up like cold water, but she stayed still. Then Mark spoke. "Soon," he said. "I just need to make sure she signs the house over first." Silence crashed over Emma. Her husband wasn't just cheating. He wasn't just lying. He was planning to strip her of the one asset he thought she had before discarding her. The house she paid for using her consulting income, money she earned without touching her inheritance, because she wanted their life to feel real, not bought. Mark didn't know about her full inheritance. All he saw was the house. He believed it was all she truly owned. He wanted financial security in case his career stalled. Sarah wanted the lifestyle without the years it would take to build it. The plan was simple in their minds. Convince Emma, the soft, dependent wife, to sign paperwork for refinancing, then leave her with nothing. Inside the room, Sarah giggled softly. "You're dragging this out. She's weak. Just push harder." "I will," Mark muttered. "She trusts me. She won't see it coming." Emma felt the world tilt, her heartbeat pounding in her ears. She wanted to scream, to kick the door open, to throw their lies back at them. But another voice cut through the chaos, her father's, quiet and steady from years ago. "When someone shows you their cruelty, don't rush to fight them with rage. Fight them with truth." She wiped the tears, blurring her vision with the back of her hand. Her body shook, but her mind was suddenly sharp. The small camera in the corner blinked red. Recording, listening, keeping everything. She stepped back into the shadows, forcing herself not to make a sound. She couldn't stay another second. Emma turned and moved down the hallway, her steps quick but controlled. At the exit door, she paused, her hand trembling on the handle. "If this is the truth," she whispered to herself, "tomorrow won't be the same." She pushed the door open and stepped into the night, her heart shattered, but her mind awake in a way it had never been. As she walked to her car, she didn't look up at the security camera above the door. Still recording, still storing. That footage would matter later, much sooner than Mark and Sarah ever imagined. Chaos struck before Emma Turner even stepped fully onto the office floor. A loud crash echoed through the hallway, papers flying, a chair skidding across the tiles, voices rising with sharp edges. Employees froze in place, staring toward the glass-walled conference room as if a storm had burst inside it. At the center of it, Mark Turner, 32, furious, shoulders rigid, eyes wild with frustration. He shoved a folder onto the floor again as he stormed out of the meeting room. His jaw clenched so tightly it looked painful. The veins in his neck stood out. Behind him followed Sarah Blake, red lipstick freshly applied, trying to arrange her face into concern but failing. Her eyes glittered with something closer to adrenaline, almost enjoyment. Behind Sarah came Linda Carson, Mark's mother, her mouth pulled tight, clutching her handbag like the world had wronged her son personally. The air around them felt dangerous. Employees stood still. Some whispered. Others stepped back instinctively, putting distance between themselves and Mark's rage. Emma stepped out of the elevator at the worst possible moment. Intensity slammed into her. She saw Mark's red face. She saw Sarah's almost smile. She saw Linda's glare. She saw dozens of employees watching, horrified or entertained. And she saw the entire storm barreling straight toward her. A woman near her whispered, "He's completely lost it." Emma swallowed, steadying her breath. She had barely slept after the night she overheard Mark and Sarah. In the early hours, she had called Daniel, her father's old lawyer, and quietly arranged to retrieve security footage and review her legal options. Mark didn't know that. All he knew was that his world had started to press in on him. Earlier that morning, he had been called into a private meeting with senior management. Someone had anonymously flagged concerning behavior and possible misconduct. He wasn't fired yet, but he was warned. Every move would be watched. The guilt, the fear of exposure, the pressure to keep Sarah satisfied and Linda impressed. It all churned inside him. Now he saw Emma standing there, calm and composed in the middle of the hallway, and his mind twisted her into the problem instead of the person he'd hurt. She stepped toward him with a calmness she didn't feel. "Mark," she said softly, "let's talk in your office. You need a moment." He snapped before she finished. "Don't tell me what I need," Mark shouted, pointing a shaking finger at her. His voice boomed so loudly that employees flinched. Emma stopped, stunned by the intensity in his eyes. She raised her hands slightly, palms open, a gesture of peace. "I'm just asking you to breathe," she said quietly. "You're upset, and this isn't—" He cut her off, louder. "You don't get to talk to me like that. Not here. Not in front of everyone." Mark's outburst wasn't just about Emma's words. He was juggling shame from the management warning, fear that someone had reported him, the stress of hiding his affair, and the fragile ego of a man who had spent years building a false image of control. To keep that image alive, he needed Emma to look small. He needed to show everyone he was the one in charge. Emma tried again. "Mark, please. Let's step inside and—" His anger detonated. Mark took 2 long strides toward her. Too fast, too close, too loud. He towered over her, chest heaving, eyes dark with something far beyond irritation. "Stop telling me what to do," he hissed. "You don't get to embarrass me like this." His hand rose. For a heartbeat, the entire world slowed. Sound faded, faces blurred. Even the hum of the air conditioning disappeared. And then, he slapped her across the face. The sound cracked through the hallway, sharp, brutal, final. Emma's head jerked from the impact. Her hair whipped across her face. Her cheek burned instantly, heat spreading under her skin. The office froze. Someone gasped. A man dropped the stack of files he was carrying. Another employee covered her mouth. Even the elevator behind Emma dinged open and closed again, without anyone stepping inside. Sarah Blake smirked, proud, satisfied, resentful of the part of her that still feared being second. Linda Carson's lips twisted into a sneer, as if Emma had invited this, as if humiliation was what she deserved. Emma didn't fall. She didn't scream. She didn't even raise her hand to her cheek. She lifted her head slowly, letting everyone see the red mark forming on her face, letting the silence do what no argument could. Her eyes met Mark's. For a split second, something flickered there. Shock, maybe even fear. He knew there were cameras. He knew people were watching. He knew this wasn't just a private loss of control, but his pride stomped that flicker out. "You don't speak to me like that," he growled again, quieter now but more venomous. "Not here. Not in public." Emma's voice came out soft. "I see," she whispered. A breath, a realization, a goodbye she didn't say out loud. "This is who you've become." The words landed heavier than the slap. Mark blinked. Sarah stiffened. Linda frowned, confused by the calm. Employees stared, waiting for Emma to collapse. to yell, to run. She did none of those things. She turned away instead, her movements controlled, and walked toward the women's restroom, heels steady against the floor, even though her hands were shaking. As she pushed the door open, one thought cut through the pain like a blade. If he can do this in public, with witnesses, what else was he willing to do when no one was looking? Emma Turner burst through the bathroom door with the force of someone trying not to collapse. The heavy door slammed behind her, the sound echoing sharply against the tiled walls. She stumbled forward and gripped the sink, her breath shaking, her heart pounding so hard it felt like it might tear through her chest. Her cheek was still burning from Mark's slap, hot, red, pulsing. Her reflection stared back at her, wide eyes, trembling lips, the face of a woman caught between breaking and waking up. Intensity filled the room. She pushed herself into the far stall, locked it quickly, and pressed her back against the cold metal door. Her breath hitched. A small sob escaped before she could stop it. Not loud, not dramatic, just raw, broken sound. She covered her mouth with both hands, forcing the next sob back down. Tears spilled anyway. She sank slowly onto the toilet seat, knees weak, head dropping forward, alone, humiliated, wounded. The burn on her cheek was nothing compared to the fire spreading through her chest. She had been slapped, not in private, not in a moment of regret, but in front of his mother, his mistress, and an entire floor of employees. A public declaration of disrespect. Her thoughts crashed into each other. Mark was cheating, Mark was lying, Mark was planning to take their home, and now Mark was willing to hurt her in front of witnesses. The betrayal wasn't just emotional anymore. It was violent, strategic, escalating. Her mind replayed the night in the private meeting room, the one that had split her world open. She could still hear Sarah's voice. "When are you going to divorce her? She's a nobody." And Mark's answer, "Soon. I just need to make sure she signs the house over first." Her chest tightened so hard it hurt to breathe. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't a moment of weakness. It was a plan. Emma hadn't come to the bathroom because she was weak. She needed privacy. She needed control. She needed somewhere she could break safely before she rebuilt herself. If she confronted him now, bleeding anger, trembling, crying, he'd twist it. He'd call her hysterical. He'd paint himself as the victim. She refused to give him that story. Her body trembled harder. Tears fell faster, landing on her hands. But she kept her sobs small and contained. She refused to let the world outside hear her crumble. Slowly, a different memory surfaced through the panic. Soft, steady, like a hand reaching through chaos. Her father. She was 10, sitting on the porch steps, crying after a group of kids at school mocked her for being weird and quiet. Richard Keller had knelt in front of her, wiped her tears and said, "When people are cruel, don't waste your strength trying to scream them into kindness. Use your strength to protect yourself with truth." Another flash. Him in the office, teaching her how to read contracts. Another. Him reminding her, "You'll be powerful one day, Emma, not because you shout, but because you see clearly." The tears slowed. Her breathing steadied. Her fingers stopped shaking. Silence filled the stall, not heavy, but grounding. Emma wiped her face with her sleeve, carefully drying her cheeks. She lifted her head. The pain in her chest didn't vanish, but it found edges, shape, direction. She placed her palm gently against her burning cheek, studying the sting. Not just as hurt, but as evidence. Her father's voice echoed again, more clearly now. "Fight with truth." A quiet shift settled into her bones. Not loud, not explosive, but strong. Her face hardened, not with rage, but with purpose. She unlocked the stall and walked to the sink. She washed her hands, splashed cool water over her face, watched the red mark on her cheek in the mirror, seeing it now as both wound and witness. Then she reached into her bag and pulled out her phone. Her fingers were steady. She opened her messages and scrolled to a contact saved under a simple name, Daniel R. There was a time, months ago, when she'd called Daniel Reed, her father's former lawyer, and asked a question she never thought she'd need to ask. What if I someday have to protect myself from my own husband? Daniel had responded calmly, professionally, but beneath it, with genuine concern. He'd suggested a contingency plan, quiet monitoring of financial movements, keeping copies of sensitive emails, confirming security footage was backed up. If you ever need to trigger all of it at once, he told her, send me just one message. Activate the file. I'll know what it means. I'll pull everything. Back then, she hoped she would never use it. Now she typed the words. Activate the file. She hit send. No explanation, no apology. A few seconds later, her phone buzzed. Understood. Meet me in the private office in 30 minutes. I'll bring everything. Emma locked her phone and slid it back into her bag. She stared at her reflection one last time. The mark on her cheek was still there, but the expression behind it had changed completely. She wasn't just the woman who got slapped. She was the woman about to answer cruelty with proof. She took hold of the bathroom door handle. If truth is what he fears, she whispered, then truth is exactly what he's going to meet. She stepped out into the hallway, employees still whispering about the slap, some glancing away guiltily when they saw her. None of them noticed the new expression in her eyes. Not revenge, but evidence. Emma Turner walked into the private office with a force that didn't match her calm face. The door shut behind her with a quiet click, but the intensity in her steps filled the room. She held her purse close, her posture controlled, every movement deliberate. Inside the office sat Daniel Reed. Early 40s, neat suit, calm eyes, the kind of man who could stand in a courtroom or a boardroom and never raise his voice, yet still command attention. He had once worked directly for her father, handling high-stakes negotiations no one ever heard about. He was the first person Richard Keller had told the truth to. If anything happens to me, she's in charge. So Daniel knew exactly who Emma really was, and when he saw the faint bruise rising along her cheek, he froze. Emma! His voice was soft but edged with alarm. Sit down. Tell me what happened. She didn't sit. Not yet. She placed her purse on the table, opened it, and pulled out a small flash drive. She set it gently in front of him, as if she were placing a detonator down. Daniel looked at the drive, then at her eyes. Steady, contained, dangerous in their calm. What is this? He asked. Emma finally spoke. Everything you asked me to collect, she said, and whatever the security team has from last night and today. She sat. Now. Daniel took the flash drive, slid it into his laptop, and waited. When the folders appeared on screen, his jaw tightened. Emma, he said quietly, how long has this been going on? She didn't look away. Long enough to know this isn't confusion. It's cruelty. The screen displayed labeled folders, evidence, one security footage video clips from Keller Holdings and Brightline, compiled by the head of security after Emma's activate the file message. The hallway slap, the private meeting room where she'd overheard Mark and Sarah, the footage of him storming through the office that morning. Daniel clicked on the clip of the slap. The audio filled the room. Stop telling me what to do. You don't get to embarrass me like this. Then the crack of Mark's hand against Emma's face. Daniel's hands curled slightly on the desk. That's assault, he said, in front of witnesses and on company property. Emma stayed silent. He clicked to the next clip, the private meeting room from the night before. Sarah's voice. When are you going to divorce her? She's a nobody. Mark's voice. Soon. I just need to make sure she signs the house over first. Daniel exhaled slowly, anger controlled but visible. So it wasn't just the affair, it was premeditated. Evidence 2. Audio backups. Some security rooms recorded separate audio for clarity. Daniel played segments where Mark and Sarah laughed about how soft Emma was, how dependent, how easy it would be. She won't see it coming, Mark said in one file. She trusts me. Emma's fingers tightened around the edge of the chair. Evidence 3. Financial records, screenshots of Mark transferring money from their joint account into a hidden one in his name. Payments for hotel rooms, expensive jewelry receipts that Emma had never received. Daniel scrolled. You authorized access to your bank data? He asked. I did, Emma replied. When I first suspected something was wrong, I told the bank I wanted alerts on joint account irregularities. They flagged his transfers. I forwarded them to you. He nodded. You did everything right. Evidence. 4 HR and internal reports complaints about Sarah's behavior, belittling co-workers, manipulating schedules, making suggestive comments about her relationship with Mark, notes about Linda bullying younger staff, mocking them, spreading gossip about the consultant wife who lives off her husband. HR tried to address some of these quietly, Daniel said, reading, but with your position, these now have weight at the board level. They're no longer rumors, they're a pattern. Evidence 5. Emails and messages. Emails from Mark to a close friend. Once she signs the house papers, I'm gone. Sarah and I deserve better than this boring life. She's too soft to fight back. Daniel closed the laptop slowly, the room filled with heavy silence, the kind that comes just before something irreversible. He looked at her fully now. Emma, he said carefully, you're not just ending a marriage. He paused. You're about to trigger HR action, legal consequences, and corporate discipline in one move. This doesn't just affect him. It affects everyone who helped him. Emma's voice was low, steady. They dismantled my life, she said. My trust, my dignity, my safety. She held his gaze. I'm not dismantling them. I'm telling the truth. Daniel studied her for a moment, then nodded with respect. We go in steps, he said. First, I'll present this to the board as both legal counsel and representative of the majority shareholder. You. HR will use it to justify terminations. Then we file for divorce and a restraining order. The assault gives us strong grounds. He slid a set of documents toward her. These begin that process. Once you sign, it's official. Emma reached for the pen. Before she touched it, her phone buzzed. A message from a number she knew belonged to the head of security. Be aware, your husband is demanding answers. He knows someone is helping you. Emma's hand paused over the pen. Daniel frowned. What is it? She showed him the message. He knows, she said softly, and he's not going to sit quietly. Daniel's jaw tightened. Then we move up the timeline. He placed the pen firmly in her hand. Sign, Emma, he said. Let the truth start working. She pressed the pen to the paper. The boardroom door slammed open so hard it bounced off the stopper. Mark Turner stormed in like a man ready for war. Everyone seated around the long, polished table jumped. Papers rustled. A glass of water rattled. Even the overhead lights seemed too bright under the heat of his anger. He scanned the room, chest heaving. Sarah Blake sat near the end of the table, legs crossed, trying to look concerned, though her eyes glittered with curiosity. Hungry for drama she didn't fully understand. Linda Carson sat stiffly in a chair along the wall, clutching her handbag, convinced this meeting was about punishing Emma for making Mark look bad. Mark slammed his palm onto the table. Where is she? He snarled. Where's Emma? And why am I being dragged into a meeting I didn't call? Before anyone could respond, the opposite door opened. Daniel Reed walked in, calm as ever, carrying a thick folder and a slim laptop bag. His measured steps swallowed some of the chaos in the room. Mark stared at him with disgust. Why is her lawyer here? This is a company issue. Daniel took a seat near the head of the table. This is both a company issue and a legal one, he said, which is why I'm here, as counsel for Keller Holdings and for its majority shareholder. Linda frowned. Shareholder? Over my son? Daniel looked at her evenly. Over all of you. The air tightened. Then the board members entered. 5 senior executives, faces serious, eyes sharp. They nodded to Daniel and took their places. Not one of them acknowledged Mark, Sarah, or Linda. Mark's face flushed. What the hell is going on? No one answered, until the door opened one last time. Emma Turner walked in. No trembling, no tears, no visible anger. Her cheeks still showed the faint yellowing trace of the bruise from his slap. But her eyes were different now, cool, focused, awake. The board members nodded to her respectfully. Mark stood abruptly. Why is she here? Daniel answered. Because she called this meeting. Shock rippled around the room. Sarah blinked. She what? Why would she? She doesn't have that kind of authority. Linda scoffed. Silly girl probably thinks being his wife gives her power. Daniel opened his folder. That assumption, he said, is the reason we're here. He slid a stack of documents in Mark's direction. Read. Mark snatched them up, flipping through angrily. His eyes moved quickly, then slower, then stopped. His color drained. His hand shook. "What is this?" he whispered. Linda leaned over his shoulder, reading. Her fingers tightened on her handbag strap. No, that can't be right. This is a trick. It's fake." Sarah grabbed another copy, her eyes flicking across the lines. Her face froze. "You've got to be kidding me." The documents were simple. Ownership records, trust documents, board resolutions. All saying one thing. Emma Turner was the majority shareholder of Keller Holdings, with controlling interest and final decision power over its subsidiaries, including this company. She wasn't just a consultant. She wasn't nobody. She was their employer. The room went dead quiet. Emma stepped forward, her voice soft but edged with steel. "You all worked for me," she said, "while helping destroy me." Linda shook her head, eyes wide. "Why didn't you tell us?" Emma met her gaze. "Because I wanted to see how you acted when you thought I had nothing." Sarah stood up abruptly, chair scraping. "This doesn't mean anything. I haven't done anything wrong. You can't fire me just because you're rich." Daniel lifted another set of papers. "We can, and we are," he said. "HR investigations backed by your own emails, messages, and recorded behavior. 6 separate complaints. Evidence of harassment and unethical conduct." He slid the file toward her. Sarah's hands shook as she skimmed it. Linda tried to stand next, defensive. "I was only protecting my son. I didn't do anything." Daniel placed another document in front of her. "Workplace bullying," he said. "Multiple witnesses, intimidation, disruptive gossip, all in violation of company policy. Under standard conditions, that alone would be grounds for termination. Under these," he nodded toward Emma, "it's non-negotiable." Then he turned to Mark. "And you." Mark swallowed hard. His voice came out weak. "Emma, please. Don't do this. We can fix this. We can talk. I lost my temper." Emma's eyes didn't soften. "You slapped me in front of 16 employees," she said quietly. "You cheated on me. You tried to take my home. You called me nothing." She turned to the board. "As majority shareholder, I support the following actions." Daniel read them aloud. "Effective immediately. Sarah Blake, employment terminated for misconduct. Linda Carson, employment terminated for repeated violations of workplace standards. Mark Turner, suspended pending legal investigation and permanently barred from leadership roles." Gasps spilled in from the hallway, where employees gathered just out of sight. Mark sank into his chair, shoulders collapsing. "Emma, I'm begging you, don't end my career." She didn't look at him. Instead, she reached into her bag and pulled out a sealed envelope. She slid it across the table. He opened it with trembling hands. "Divorce papers." Her voice didn't rise. It didn't tremble. "This," Emma said, "is just the legal side of the truth." She turned and walked toward the door. Her phone buzzed in her hand. She glanced down at the message. From Daniel's paralegal, time-stamped minutes ago. "Court accepted urgent filings. Hearing moved up. Updates coming today. There may be more." Her eyes narrowed slightly. Chaos erupted the moment Mark Turner stepped out of the boardroom. Security was already waiting. 2 guards approached him, posture professional but firm. Their presence alone was a message. Whatever power he thought he had was gone. "Mr. Turner," one guard said, "you'll need to collect your personal belongings. Your badge access has been suspended." Mark's face twisted. "I don't need an escort. I'm not a criminal." But his voice sounded small against the echo of what everyone had just seen, the slap in the hallway. The trembling bruise on Emma's face, the footage already sent to HR, already reviewed by the board. Everyone knew Linda Carson was next. An HR representative approached her, soft but unwavering. "Mrs. Carson, your role here has been terminated. Your access is revoked. We'll escort you to retrieve your things." Linda's eyes filled with panic. "You can't fire me," she snapped. "I'm his mother. You can't just—" The HR rep handed her a printed document summarizing the complaints and policy violations. Linda's hand shook as she read. Her voice cracked. "She did this. That ungrateful girl did this." But no one answered her. Employees watched quietly. Some looked away, uncomfortable. Others stood still, absorbing the consequences of behavior they'd once thought untouchable. Sarah Blake stormed out of the boardroom next, her mascara smudged, her expression a mix of fury and disbelief. "This is insane," she hissed. "I didn't do anything that doesn't happen in every office." No one agreed out loud. She hurried to catch up with Mark. "Mark, baby, listen," she said, grabbing his arm. "We can fix this. You can talk to her. Tell her you were stressed. She still loves you, right? We can—" Mark jerked his arm away. "They fired me, Sarah," he shouted. "They fired my mother. You said she was nothing. You said this would be easy." Sarah's face hardened in a heartbeat. The desperation vanished, replaced by cold calculation. "Don't blame me because you were stupid enough to get caught," she said quietly. "You're the one who hit her in front of a camera." He stared at her, stunned. "You said you were with me," he whispered. She smoothed her hair and shrugged. "I'm with whoever isn't ruined." And just like that, she turned and walked toward the elevator. It was the last time he saw her in that building. Over the next several weeks, Mark's life unraveled fast. First, Brightline made his termination official. The internal story, assault, misconduct, and ethical breaches, moved quietly through the corporate network. Officially, no one was supposed to discuss it. Unofficially, recruiters and executives talked. No one wanted to take the risk. Potential employers stopped returning his calls. LinkedIn messages went unread. HR departments flagged his name in red. His hidden account, the one he'd been quietly filling with money from the joint account, was discovered and cataloged in the divorce filings. Legal fees began to pile up. His mother, who had once praised him as the successful son, now called only to cry or to blame him. "You lost us everything," she said more than once. Sarah didn't answer his messages. He saw her in a photo weeks later, tagged at a rooftop event beside a senior executive from another firm. She looked fine. Better than fine. Life moved on without him. Sleep deserted him. His reflection grew hollow. Dark circles, unshaven jaw, eyes that flinched at every sound. He began to understand what Emma had meant when she said he'd chosen to break himself when he chose to break her. One evening, unable to bear the silence of his temporary apartment, he found himself standing in front of the house he'd once tried to steal. Emma's house. The porch light was on. The garden she'd tended in small, quiet moments looked peaceful. He stood there for a long time before he knocked. When the door opened, Emma didn't look surprised. She had expected something like this sooner or later. She didn't speak first. "Emma," Mark's voice cracked. Please talk to me." She said nothing. He took a shaky step closer. "I'm begging you. I'm nothing without you." Her eyes softened, not with love, but with grief for the man he used to be. "You proved that," she said, "when you built your whole identity on using me." He flinched. "I was stupid," he said. "I was angry. I was trying to feel important. Sarah, she made me feel like I mattered. I don't even know who I am now." Emma held his gaze. "Mark," she said quietly, "you had every chance to choose who you wanted to be. You chose this." He reached out, hands shaking, as if to touch her arm. She stepped back. "Please," he whispered, "I'll apologize publicly. I'll tell them it was a mistake. No," she said, her voice soft but final. "You weren't confused. You were cruel. You planned to break me. You don't get to ask me to save you from the consequences." His knees wobbled. A tear slipped down his face. "Don't leave me like this." Emma took a slow breath and gently closed the door. Through the narrowing gap, she said only two words: "Get a lawyer." The door clicked shut. Silence. Her phone vibrated in her pocket. A message from Daniel. "Hearing moved up to tomorrow. He's unstable. Be careful at work." She looked at the closed door. The moment Emma Turner stepped into the company atrium the next morning, she felt it. Intensity. Security guards stood near the front desk, not tense but alert. Employees clustered in small groups, whispering urgently. Notifications pinged across phones as a new internal announcement went live. On the large screens in the lobby, the company's blue and white template framed a statement from Keller Holdings. Leadership Conduct Review, Outcome Summary, termination of former manager Mark Turner for misconduct and assault on employee. Termination of employees, Linda Carson and Sarah Blake for policy violations and workplace harassment. Commitment to a safer, more respectful environment under direct oversight of majority shareholder Emma Turner. The world inside the building didn't just shift, it reset. On a bench in the middle of the atrium sat Linda Carson. Her back was hunched, her hair slightly disheveled, her eyes swollen from tears. She clutched her handbag as if squeezing it could squeeze the outcome back into shape. "No," she sobbed. "No, this can't be happening. My son was supposed to be in charge. He said he'd take care of us. He promised." Two employees hovered nearby, torn between sympathy and the memory of years of her biting remarks. They didn't know what to say. Not far from her, leaning against a column, stood Sarah Blake. She was reading an email on her phone, lips pressed into a thin line. Effective immediately, breach of conduct. Prohibited from entering company property. Humiliation burned in her cheeks. She glanced around for anyone who might look at her with pity. But people turned away. A few whispered. One smirked. Justice was thick in the air, uncomfortable but undeniable. "This wasn't supposed to happen," she muttered. "He said she was nobody." An employee passing by, someone Sarah had once dismissed as irrelevant, replied quietly without stopping. "She was never nobody. You just didn't see her." Sarah's jaw clenched. She said nothing. Then the atrium doors opened again. Mark Turner stumbled inside. His shirt wrinkled, hair unkempt, eyes bloodshot. He held his phone in one trembling hand. The blue glow of an email reflected in his expression. His face was crumpled, somewhere between shock and despair. He looked around. For his mother, for Sarah, for anyone who might stand between him and the consequences. When he saw Linda, he rushed toward her. "Mom," he said, voice cracking, "this can be appealed, right? They can't just end everything over one mistake. The board—" She pushed him back with shaking hands. "You lost your job," she cried. "You lost my job. You lost your wife. You lost the house. Everything you touched, you ruined." He stared at her, stunned, as if he'd expected her to be his shield. She turned away, sobbing into her hands. He staggered over to Sarah next. "Sarah, please," he said. Tell them it wasn't all my fault. We both—" She pulled her arm out of his reach sharply. "Don't touch me," she said, voice low and cold. "I'm not tying myself to a man with nothing left." He blinked at her. "Nothing left?" She tucked her phone into her bag. "No job, no reputation, no access. What exactly do you think you still are?" She walked out of the atrium without another glance. Mark watched her go. The strength left his legs. He dropped his phone. It clattered on the polished floor. He sank to his knees, hands covering his face as sobs tore out of him. Raw, ugly, impossible to control. Employees didn't move. Some watched. Some turned away. Some remembered times he'd laughed at them or spoken down to them and felt the strange mix of discomfort and justice. Linda cried on her bench. Sarah disappeared into a new life. Mark shattered. And then the atrium quieted because everyone felt her presence before they fully saw her. Emma Turner walked in, not with swagger, not with arrogance, with calm. Her hair fell smoothly over her shoulders. Her suit was simple but clean. Her steps were measured. There was no need for raised voices or dramatic gestures. Power didn't roar around her. It settled. Employees parted instinctively, creating a path. Some nodded to her with new respect. Others lowered their eyes, ashamed they once believed the story that she was nothing. She passed Linda first. The older woman reached out weakly. "Emma, please, help my son. He has nothing left." Emma stopped. Her voice was gentle but unyielding. "I tried to help him for years," she said. "He didn't want help. He wanted control." Linda's tears flowed harder. Emma moved on. She approached Mark last. He lifted his head slowly, eyes red, cheeks wet. "Emma," he whispered, "please, say something. I have nothing without you." She looked at him with a mixture of sadness and clarity. "You became nothing," she said softly, "the moment you decided my pain was acceptable as long as you got what you wanted." He sobbed harder. "I'm sorry," he choked. "I'm so sorry. I don't know who I am now." Emma held his gaze a moment longer. "That's something you'll have to learn without me," she replied. She stepped back. At that exact moment, her phone buzzed in her hand. A message from Daniel. "Court order just signed. Divorce granted. House confirmed in your name. Restraining order approved. Come up when you're ready. Her eyes closed briefly as she absorbed it. This was it, not revenge. Closure. As she walked toward the elevator, her thoughts unfolded like a quiet narration in her mind. Words she wished every underestimated person could hear. Power was never what I lacked. It was what I refused to use, until they left me no other choice. She stepped into the elevator. Before the doors closed, she glanced back one last time at what was left of her old life. Her ex-husband on his knees, her former mother-in-law broken, her ex-rival gone, employees watching and learning. She whispered not to them, but to herself, and to anyone listening in their own lives. Some people break you just to prove you're weak. What you do next decides who you really are. The doors slid shut with a soft chime. As the elevator rose, her phone buzzed again. A final message from Daniel. I also have news about your father's last directive. It changes more than just your marriage. Emma looked at the screen, a small, surprised breath leaving her chest. Whatever lay ahead upstairs wasn't about Mark, Linda, or Sarah. It was about who she would choose to become next. And somewhere, without needing cameras or witnesses, tears fell for the right reason at last. Not from being broken, but from finally being free.